What if I told you that the most dominant player in the NBA today doesn't overwhelm opponents with insane jumping ability or blistering speed, and he doesn't fill highlight reels by soaring above the rim on every other possession? That's right. We're talking about someone who, at first glance, doesn't even look like a typical superstar. Yet somehow, this player manages to pick teams apart until coaches all across the league are left with the same stunned question. How do we stop Nikola Jokić? The truth is, most coaches already know the answer, and it's not the one they want to hear. There is no way to truly shut him down. Jokić is a 7-footer who doesn't rely on explosive moves to the basket or jaw-dropping displays of athleticism. Instead, he slices through defenses using a style that blends old-school fundamentals with modern versatility. He can sink three-pointers when defenders give him space, run the fast break like a crafty point guard, and throw pinpoint passes that make entire defensive sets look silly. Most shocking of all, he does it without that frantic energy you'd expect from a star carrying a franchise. In fact, Jokić never appears rushed or frazzled. He just glides around, wearing that relaxed expression that drives opposing coaches insane. But what really sets Jokić apart from other NBA titans? Simple. He's transforming how teams approach the game and how coaches prepare. While someone like Giannis Antetokounmpo bulldozes to the rim with unstoppable power, or a player like Stephen Curry torches you from outside the arc the moment you give him a sliver of daylight, Jokić merges multiple skill sets into one unstoppable package. Don't let his unassuming, almost slow-paced style fool you. He's as methodical as it gets, patiently dissecting each matchup like a surgeon operating on the hardwood. Coaches who've spent entire seasons studying him admit that no matter how many hours they pour into film sessions, they still can't find a surefire way to disrupt his rhythm. That's why this script exists. We're about to explore what the league's most respected coaches really think of Jokić, the new face of positionless basketball. From Gregg Popovich to Steve Kerr, from Erik Spoelstra to Tyronn Lue, every single one of them has tried to crack the code, and every single one of them has walked away shaking their heads in disbelief. By the end of this video, you'll see why the debate about who's the best player in the world often begins and ends with Nikola Jokic's name. But be warned, if you're a fan of traditional hoops wisdom, you might find this story a bit unsettling. Jokić is upending the status quo, forcing even the most experienced coaching minds to adapt, and rewriting the rules of how we evaluate greatness in the NBA. So buckle up, because we're diving into the saga of the Serbian center who turned the basketball world on its head, and we're doing it through the eyes of the men tasked with plotting his downfall, the coaches themselves. To understand why Nikola Jokić is such a problem, we first have to break down the typical strategies NBA teams rely on when facing star players. Usually, if you're dealing with a dominant scorer like Kevin Durant, you might try to trap him on pick and rolls or throw multiple defenders his way to force him into tough shots. Against a physically imposing force like Giannis, you'd pack the paint, build a wall, and make him beat you with jumpers. Facing an elite three-point marksman such as Stephen Curry, you chase him off the line, fight over every screen, and accept that he's still probably going to sink shots from the logo. These are standard defensive game plans. Sometimes they work, often they don't, but at least you have a blueprint. With Jokić, that blueprint dissolves the moment he catches the ball. Why? Because he operates like a quarterback reading a defense at the line of scrimmage. He's just as happy to pass as he is to score. And if you force him to keep the ball, he'll score with startling efficiency, using soft floaters, step-back mid-range jumpers, or even the occasional fadeaway off one foot, reminiscent of Dirk Nowitzki. Once you send an extra defender his way to stop that sweet touch around the rim, he'll whip a pass right to someone standing all alone beyond the arc. If that shooter is cold, Jokić might reset the possession at the top of the key, surveying the floor like a chess master who sees 4 moves ahead of everyone else. What's more astonishing is his ability to do all this without looking like he's exerting much effort. He's not barreling into defenders or leaping sky high. Instead, he's carefully choosing angles, leveraging footwork, and using subtle head fakes to freeze defenders just long enough to deliver the perfect pass. If you go under a screen, he'll step back and shoot. If you go over it, he'll slip a pass to a cutter. If you drop into coverage, he'll pop a mid-range jumper. And this is all happening at a pace that feels almost leisurely, which is part of what makes it so disorienting. Defenders who are used to anticipating sudden bursts of speed find themselves overplaying him, only to watch Jokić calmly pivot into an easy layup. Traditional scouting reports fall flat because they rarely account for a big man who's just as lethal slinging cross-court dimes as he is posting up. Standard defensive sets become liabilities as Jokić identifies mismatches instantly. He can even start a fast break on his own by securing a rebound and throwing an outlet pass reminiscent of Kevin Love in his prime or Bill Walton back in the day. Name another center who consistently does that with pinpoint precision, hitting shooters in stride at half court. We also need to talk about how Jokić controls the tempo. In the modern NBA, a lot of teams push the pace, hoping to catch defenses off balance. Jokić, however, seems more interested in controlling possessions like an orchestra conductor. Even if the Denver Nuggets don't run a traditional fast break, Jokic's full-court pass can transform a simple rebound into a highlight reel assist, making the notion of transition defense for opposing teams more complicated. If you hustle back too aggressively, he might just wait for a trailer to come late for a wide-open three. If you hang back, he'll push the ball himself, knowing he can exploit any miscommunication. Basically, Jokić is the ultimate chess player, and most defenders are still trying to remember how the pieces move. If you're playing checkers while he's orchestrating a grandmaster-level strategy, it's easy to see why coaches feel helpless. They watch game film of their players making the right reads on paper, only to have Jokić undermine those reads with a silky pass or a well-timed cut that seems to come out of nowhere. That's why we're seeing a trend of coaches openly admitting they have no magic bullet to slow him down, because the usual defensive schemes don't apply when you're facing a 7-foot hybrid of a point guard and a traditional center who might drop a triple-double with ease. So what exactly are these top-tier coaches saying? Let's start with Chris Finch of the Minnesota Timberwolves. After a demoralizing series against the Denver Nuggets, Finch, known for his innovative offensive mind, sounded completely exasperated when asked about how to contain Jokić. He basically confessed, "We tried to throw everything at him and none of it mattered." That's not exactly something you hear often from an NBA head coach, but it captures the universal frustration Jokić induces. You can watch hours of film, set up all the traps, and game plan meticulously, only for Jokić to waltz to a 30-point, 15-assist, 12-rebound outing like it's routine. Then there's Steve Kerr, arguably one of the brightest coaching minds of this generation. After years of riding with the Golden State Warriors dynasty, he's developed a keen eye for elite talent, having coached Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, and Kevin Durant, while also having played alongside Michael Jordan back in his day. So, when Kerr calls Nikola Jokić the best player in the world, it's not a hollow statement. Kerr's teams have game-planned against LeBron James and other all-time greats, but he emphasizes that Jokic's ability to dominate a game without relying on standard superstar patterns is unprecedented. And then we have Erik Spoelstra of the Miami Heat, who faced Jokić on the NBA's biggest stage. Spoelstra, known for his defensive schemes and in-game adjustments, basically laughed at the suggestion that you could turn Jokić into a one-dimensional scorer. "That's the untrained, eye-talking," he quipped, pointing out that if you try to force him to shoot, he'll get 40 points with ease. If you sag off of him, he might drain three-pointers or pick you apart with passes. There's no scenario where you can relegate him to one aspect of the game and come out unscathed. And we haven't even gotten to Gregg Popovich, the 5-time champion, who's coached everyone from Tim Duncan and Tony Parker to Kawhi Leonard, not to mention having faced off against legends like Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal. Pop's seen it all, but he still gets a sparkle in his eye talking about Jokić. He's called Jokić unorthodox and totally unselfish, comparing him to Larry Bird. When a Hall of Fame coach who's witnessed multiple generations of NBA icons uses that kind of language, it's impossible to ignore. The common thread in all these testimonies is a sense of powerlessness. Coaches normally pride themselves on developing at least one or two effective tactics to limit a star's strengths. With Jokić, they're coming up empty. It's a feeling akin to playing a game of whack-a-mole, only to find out the mole is teleporting across the board at will. By the time you adapt to one of Jokic's tendencies, he's already shifted into a different mode. He can turn from scorer to facilitator, from post-up threat to three-point shooter, and from floor general to offensive rebounder in the blink of an eye. How does Jokić fare against the league's top defenders? Let's consider a scenario. A team with a physically imposing center who can clog the paint, plus a rangy power forward who can switch on to quicker players. That sounds solid in theory, right? You'd think, we'll put our big on him to handle his post moves, and if he tries to face up, we can switch a more agile guy to keep up with his footwork. But that logic crumbles the moment Jokić sees the mismatch. If the smaller defender ends up on him, Jokić will methodically back them down until he's close enough for a gentle hook shot. The moment a double team comes, he's already spotted a cutter gliding toward the rim or a shooter camped out at the three-point line. If a big man tries to stay with him on the perimeter, Jokić might just step back and shoot, or dribble into a spot where he can launch a floater. Everything happens so smoothly that defenders often look like they're stuck in mud. Doc Rivers once drew a comparison to Magic Johnson. You might think that's hyperbole, but dig deeper. Like Magic, Jokić thrives on elevating teammates, making passes that puzzle defenders, and seeing plays develop before anyone else. But Magic was a 6'9" point guard. A large guard, sure, but still a guard. Jokić is 7 feet tall and weighs around 280 pounds. The idea of a legitimate center who can pass with the flair and vision of Magic Johnson is something that historically only ever existed in basketball fantasies. And it's not just about size or skill. It's about how Jokić nullifies what defenses do best. If you watch tape of elite defensive teams, they're always rotating, always helping, always pressuring the ball handler to force mistakes. Jokić thrives on that. He loves when teams overextend themselves because it means someone, somewhere, is open. Even the best defenders can't hedge long enough or recover quickly enough when Jokić identifies the gap. It's a unique blend of court vision and passing accuracy that we usually only associate with the game's greatest pass-first guards. Now, if you're a defensive coordinator or a coach, you're left scratching your head. You might try to take away Jokic's assists by staying home on shooters, but that means leaving him in single coverage where he can go to work for 40 points. You might try to double him aggressively, but then you're gifting him easy assists. You might switch on the perimeter, but he's got a killer mid-range fadeaway. You might sag off him at the three-point line, but he's shown he can knock those down too. This is why defenders, no matter how skilled, strong, or fast they are, end up looking helpless because Jokić effectively has an answer for every question they pose. One of the most terrifying things about Nikola Jokić is that you don't just have to worry about him. You also have to worry about what he does for the rest of the team. Typically, when you discuss players who make their teammates better, you think of passers like LeBron James or Chris Paul. Yet even compared to those legends, Jokić operates on a different plane. It's not just about racking up assists. It's about orchestrating an entire offensive ecosystem that sets his teammates up for success. Look at Aaron Gordon. In Orlando, he was a decent all-around player known primarily for his dunking ability. After joining Denver, his efficiency skyrocketed. Instead of taking tough shots, Gordon now feasts on open looks and backdoor cuts, courtesy of Jokic's pinpoint passes. The same goes for players like Michael Porter Jr., who found himself the beneficiary of countless wide-open three-pointers once he learned how to move without the ball, trusting that Jokić would find him. Even role players who might struggle on other teams suddenly look unstoppable alongside Jokić because he reads defenses so thoroughly that he practically hands them points on a silver platter. Rick Carlisle highlighted this phenomenon after facing the Nuggets. As a veteran coach who's dealt with Dirk Nowitzki during his championship run in Dallas, Carlisle knows a thing or two about unstoppable offenses. Yet even he admitted that Jokić forces you to abandon conventional schemes. If you front Jokić to deny him the ball, he'll just invert the offense. If you deny his favorite passing lanes, he'll spin into a quick baseline move or find an alternative angle. Meanwhile, the other Denver players space out perfectly, waiting for that magic pass that always seems to arrive at the right time. It's a level of synergy rarely seen in the NBA, turning the Nuggets into a juggernaut capable of punishing even minor defensive lapses. But it's not just the starting lineup that benefits. Bench players, specialists, and even newcomers can instantly become more valuable in the Jokić system. If you can cut, shoot, or just make the right read at the right time, Jokić will put you in a position to shine. Teams often wonder if these Nuggets role players are really that good or if Jokić is simply inflating their numbers. The truth is, it's a bit of both. Jokić does elevate talent, but those players also adapt to his style, honing their instincts to move and space the floor effectively. That's what leads certain coaches like Doc Rivers to compare Jokic's effect on his teammates to what Magic Johnson did in the 1980s. Magic transformed the way the Showtime Lakers played, turning every possession into a chance for someone else to score, so long as they ran the floor and kept their eyes open for the ball. Jokić does this in a more methodical way, but the end result is the same. Everyone on the court feels like they can reach their full offensive potential, and that, in turn, drives opponents crazy. Because even if you manage to contain Jokić, to some extent you might give up 25 points to Aaron Gordon or 20 to a previously unheralded role player. Try explaining that to your fans or the media when they ask what went wrong. If 2 MVP awards and a Finals MVP weren't enough, there's another layer to this story that terrifies coaches. Most players, when they reach a certain elite status, especially MVP level, tend to plateau. They might refine small parts of their game, but massive leaps become less common. Yet Jokić seems determined to keep evolving. That's where the three-point shot becomes a major factor. Not long ago, coaches would at least console themselves by thinking, we can live with Jokić shooting from deep if it means we're denying his passes or interior game. But as Mike Budenholzer noted, Jokic's increasing willingness to shoot and make three-pointers forces defenses to stretch out even further. Now, if you're a defensive big man, you can't just hang around the paint. You have to respect that shot, stepping out to contest. The moment you do, Jokić has you exactly where he wants you. He can blow by with a slow-motion drive, which, weirdly enough, is still effective, find a cutter with a pass you never saw coming, or bait you into fouling him. In a sport where versatility is king, Jokić is stacking up new skill after new skill, morphing into the ultimate Swiss Army knife on offense. Consider also his conditioning and mental growth. Early in his career, Jokić wasn't known for having the best endurance. Over time, he's improved his fitness to the point where he can log heavy minutes without losing effectiveness. Combine that with his increasing comfort in high-pressure, playoff situations, and you get a player who is almost unstoppable come postseason. We've watched him drop jaw-dropping stat lines in crucial games, looking like a seasoned veteran who's been doing this for 2 decades. That calm demeanor under pressure has become one of his trademarks, and it continues to develop every year. Coaches find this development terrifying because they can't even rely on the notion that he's going to slow down at some point. He's in his prime and he's actively adding new dimensions to his skill set. If you go under screens to block his passing lanes, he'll pull up from 3. If you face guard him to deny the ball, he might run a dribble handoff play that frees up a shooter. If you press up on him to prevent that triple, he'll lower his shoulder, pivot, and leave you in the dust for a layup. It's the basketball equivalent of a technology that updates itself every time you find a workaround. Just when you think you've got a handle on it, a new patch is released and you're back to square one. And let's not forget the intangible factor. Jokić seems to have zero ego. He's not interested in chasing personal accolades or forcing his stats. He'll do whatever the game calls for, which makes him even harder to predict. If his team needs him to score 40, he'll do it. If they need him to notch 15 assists and focus on facilitating, he's happy to oblige. If they need him to secure 20 rebounds, he'll crash the glass all night. That kind of mindset is a nightmare for opposing coaches because you can't push him into a predictable pattern. He's essentially the perfect teammate who can break your defense in whatever way you're least prepared for. After hearing from some of the greatest coaching minds in basketball, one point becomes crystal clear. You can't stop Nikola Jokić. You can only hope to survive him. With his mix of passing wizardry, scoring touch, and unflappable demeanor, Jokić has become the central figure in the ongoing evolution of the NBA. He's not a relic of the past, nor is he a cookie-cutter modern star. He's a brand new archetype altogether, setting a standard that makes even the brightest coaches throw up their hands in exasperation. But perhaps the scariest part for the rest of the league is that Jokić doesn't seem impressed by his own accomplishments. He's not pounding his chest, claiming to be the greatest. He's simply going to work, night in and night out, looking to make the best basketball play possible. That humility, combined with his monstrous skill set, creates a gravitational pull that lifts the entire Nuggets team and draws admiration, even from the very coaches trying to defeat him. Gregg Popovich likened him to Larry Bird. Doc Rivers sees shades of Magic Johnson. Erik Spoelstra calls him the best player in the world. Steve Kerr agrees. They're all pointing to the same undeniable truth. Nikola Jokić is rewriting the manual on how to dominate professional basketball. He's doing it without the conventional superstar aura. No brash trash talk, no highlight-chasing antics, no reliance on breakneck athleticism. Will anyone crack the code that is Nikola Jokić? The prevailing evidence suggests the answer might be no. You can devise the most meticulous defensive scheme, throw countless different coverages his way, and keep your players disciplined at every turn, and Jokić will still find a crack in the armor. He's the ultimate game manager, a floor general who just so happens to be built like an old-school center. Every so often, the NBA witnesses a transformative talent who changes the way we think about the sport. In the eyes of many coaches, Jokić is that talent for this era. So the next time you watch him dismantle another team's defensive plan, remember all the brilliant minds who spent sleepless nights trying to come up with the perfect strategy, only to see it crumble under the weight of a pinpoint pass or a soft jumper. Jokic's greatness might be subtle and unassuming on the surface, but it has the entire league's coaching fraternity admitting, in one form or another, that he has no real weaknesses. And when a player has no weaknesses, all that's left is for the NBA world to recognize and appreciate a once-in-a-generation genius.